Oh, so after I read this, and also I should discuss one of the books I don't have with me because I got rid of it. I got rid of it because I couldn't even look at it anymore. I hated it that much, and the further I got from reading it, the more I hated it. And that was In the Clearing by J.P. Pomer. And I read J.P. Pomer's debut novel the year before called Call Me Evie. Hated that. The same thing happened to. Read it. I was like, that was okay, like whatever. Then got further and further away from it and hated it. And the reason that I hate his writing, and it's really unfortunate because he's an Australian thriller author, is that he thinks the reader is an idiot and he gives you everything. So just in terms of just like plot twists or anything, it's so obvious, and he'll even refer back to previous chapters. Like, so someone will be like, remember when the shopkeeper said that? That's what he meant. And it's just like, oh my God, I'm not stupid. Can we make things a little bit more nuanced, please? And I know that's only me because this is an incredibly popular author who writes incredibly popular books that people love. So I know it's just me and him. It's an issue between his writing and me that I don't like, but I just cannot. I said in my post, I'll read his books again because it took me like I read it in 6 hours. I wanted to know what happened. Like, don't get me wrong. But I just think I'm done. I'm done with his author. I do him no favors by reading his books because so many other people love them and I am not his reader. And so after I read that, I had a really, I was disappointed, and I said, I just really want a great thriller. This was mildly disappointing. Then I read J.P. Pomer's and I was like really disappointed. So I went to Old Faithful and I picked up The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. And it was so good. I love Riley Sager. Final Girls was fantastic. This was fantastic. Didn't know what was happening. Couldn't predict anything. Loved it. And then there's people that hate it. So it's all just a matter of opinion. But I just love the way Riley Sager writes things. And I feel like, the aspect of this being at a summer camp, and I love the two storylines of back when like Final Girls had the back before there were Final Girls storyline happening. And and the main character's whole how she became a final girl story. This had the same thing. They were at the same summer camp that our main character was at when she was a child, and her three best friends went missing. And essentially we were trying to figure out what happened. And then she's at a new summer camp and the same thing happens and we find out. And I loved it and I highly recommend it. And I want to read Lock Every Door, like so bad. But it doesn't come in this matching one. My Final Girls came in pink. This came in orange. I bought this, by the way. So anyway, the next book I read was Suncatcher by Ramesh Gunnesgira. And this was just a really good book, just a good literary book. It doesn't have a lot of story, doesn't have a lot of plot points. It's more a snapshot of, where are we? We're in a country. Really helpful, Jess. We're in a country in the world. Let me just read Ceylon, which I think is Sri Lanka. I might be wrong. It's now named something else, but we're in 1960s. I think that's 1964, and it's just about how the country is changing essentially through the eyes of our main protagonist, a young boy, and what he goes through. He's no longer going to school because we're in political turmoil, and it's just what happens. And I really enjoyed it, but a very slow burn. And then I read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers, and this was so good. I loved the writing. I loved the story. We're following a town, and we have a deaf mute, and it's all the people he interacts with in the town and how he changes their lives. And I just loved it. I loved every second of this book. I listened to the audiobook while reading this. I bought this myself and it was really good. I highly recommend this as a classic if anyone is after just a good old town classic, which I love. Then I read Lindy West's The Witches Are Coming. Great feminist essay collection, fantastic pop culture references. Reminds me a lot of Roxane Gay, one of my favorite authors. Loved this, gave this 5 stars, made me angry. And then I read Quality Land by Mark Ewan Kling. This is, I think it's from I think it's a German bestseller, and I think so. Anyway, this book was hilarious, and this is polarizing. People love it or they hate it, but I thought it was hilarious. It's like a 1984 type retelling. We live in Quality Land now, and the shop is like Quality Land shop, and it shops for you before you even know what you want. And the plot point of this story is that our main character gets a pink dolphin dildo, and he says, I don't want this, and it's very confusing because the shop knows what you want before you want it. So what do you mean you don't want it? And he tries to return this dolphin pink dildo, and that's what this is, and the algorithms are confused because he wants it. So I think I really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this. Quite scary. And then I read, I don't have it with me, but I read Eggshell Skull by Brie Lee. But what I do have, oh, by the way, sorry, Hachette sent me this too. Oh, and Ellen and Unwin sent me this. I have Brie Lee's Beauty, which was sent to me by Ellen and Unwin as well. I read Eggshell Skull, and then I read this. So I read both in the same month. Eggshell Skull is her memoir, essentially, of being a, what is it called when you're in the court? Oh, I can't remember what it's called. One of my friends does it. You're like a judge's associate, and you are taking the notes, and you're there for the judge, essentially, and you're to help with the judge. And he is on sexual assault cases, and she was sexually assaulted, and it's a very sad and real look at Australia's legal system and what it's like to be a woman who's sexually assaulted, and why it's such a stupid view to think someone would make that up. But anyway, I also read Beauty by Brie Lee, which is her new one. So I listened to Eggshell Skull on audio. I don't own that book, but this was sent to me by Ellen and Unwin after I read that, and I loved this. I thought it was great. Throughout Eggshell Skull, Brie Lee keeps commenting on how she's fat or how she's ugly or anything like that, and then you look at it, you look her up because you're like, okay, well, what does she look like? And she's beautiful. And so this is her talking about, you know, having to live up to this image and having this poor body image and what that looks like and why that's happening to women. And I really enjoyed it. It's very small. It took me like 2 hours to read, but I loved it. And I'm a slow reader. Oh yeah, okay, so then I read Over the Top by Jonathan from Queer Eye. Loved it. Great life story, very inspiring. So I think JVN did a really good job on that as well. I read What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami, which was interesting. A lot of running in it, but you don't need to be a runner. I'm not a runner, never run, to appreciate it and appreciate the message he's trying to get across there. Yeah, so that's his nonfiction, by the way. And then I read Maybe the Horse Will Talk by Elliot Perlman. This was sent to me by Penguin. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but it was a solid 4-star read. It was almost like what the Whisper Network was supposed to be. So a commentary on sexism in the workplace. And I found it interesting that it was written by a man. I sent this on to Nick because I think she'll really enjoy it. And I really wanted to send it on to my other friend, Sephora, at the Antisocial Influencer, but I'm hoping Nick will send it on to someone. Yeah, and we'll just keep passing it around. And then I read In the Clearing, Let's Never Discuss It Again. And then I read The Cuckoo's Calling. I read this because Zoe, I think it's Zoe Litz on Bookstagram, one of my new friends. I found her through, we started a like Australian features Bookstagram page on Bookstagram, and there was a post saying find your new book bestie, and I put on there, you know, because I feel like I'm in quite a minority with my horror and Stephen King. This isn't necessarily true, that's just what I feel. I feel like most of my Australian connections on Bookstagram are young adult readers. And so when they had the post find your book bestie, put down what you like to read, I put down that I love Stephen King. No, I think I went through the post and I found Zoe who said she loves Stephen King and she loves J.K. Rowling. And I was like, perfect. And then she messaged me saying, have you read The Cuckoo's Calling, which by Robert Galbraith, which is J.K. Rowling. And I said no. And she was like, well, pick it up now. So I did. It was fantastic. I need to read that whole series. There's a new one coming out in August. And then finally I read Teen Brain by David Gillespie. This book was fascinating. It was part a psychology lesson on how the brain works, part a damning condemnation of the use of technology, and especially in schools, which is very interesting because I am working at a school that is everything is technology, and it's really helpful for me as a teacher because I push out all of my work onto OneNote and the kids do it, but also is it bad for them that I'm always making them use their computer? There's not a lot of handwriting. So yeah, it was fascinating. And to hear his arguments towards how this is affecting the brain and how teens today are being affected, it was fascinating. I think any parent should read Teen Brain. And I also think me as a non-parent really benefited from understanding that because it understands where we came from and it can explain some of the addictive behaviors that you see in your adult life from your teenage years. So I thought that was really good too. Yep, so that's it. This video is going to go forever. If you've made it this far, thank you. I'm sure no one has, but hopefully I'll be getting videos out more than once every 5 months. Okay, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully it's a book haul. Bye.